Room number 5. A thick, misty gray fog was settled in between the mountainside, while 2 dim headlights plowed through the muddle like synchronized fireflies. David was on holiday. He sought for an escape from his mundane job and a recent breakup that went horribly wrong. He was an average man with thick brown hair, and he had a propensity to see things through a prism of negativity. He often talked to himself, which was just one of the habits that became constant issues with his ex-fiancée. The fog was extraordinarily thick, and David struggled to see the turns in the road. It was supposed to be sunny out here. With all the technological advances, we still can't get the weather right, David blurted out to himself. His hands were at 2 and 10, and he squeezed the thin steering wheel. His knuckles were pressed white. He caught a quick glimpse of an old sign that popped into view for a split second and left just as quickly. Meri Hotel. At least I know I'm headed in the right direction. As he steered his SUV down the winding road, the fibers of the fog began to glow and become mistless. Suddenly, like a veil being lifted from one's eyes, the sky was clear and clean. A luminescent ocean sparkled like streaks of diamonds from the roadside as the window wipers dried the remaining water droplets on the windshield of his SUV. That must be the hotel, he thought. In the distance, he could see the tips of brick-colored roof tiles between a cascading variety of trees. As he drove closer, he could see the classic structure of the Meri Hotel. Moments later, he pulled up to the front veranda and parked his car next to an old wood sign that read, "Guest Parking," in fanciful Old English-styled lettering. He stepped out of his car, took a deep breath of oceanside air, and a quick glimpse of the deep blue ocean water. David, who had momentarily regretted his excursion now, was more than happy about the trek through the dismal fog to this hotel by the sea. There was something he needed to do without waver. The lobby entrance was directly under the veranda, and he ascended 5 steps to the door and opened it. Immediately, across the lobby were 2 ornate dark wooded staircases that spiraled up to what looked to be 3 floors. The lobby desk had a similar motif and was just as beautiful to look at and admire. Soft music was playing in the background, a subtle piano score that seemed to extrapolate from the mind, peace, and sentiment. As he walked to the lobby desk, he noticed that there wasn't a soul around, not a peep of human existence to be seen or heard, just clean, vibrant piano keys chirping its jingle. There was a brass bell on the desktop, next to a white card folded on end to create a standing triangle. It read, "For assistance," in the same old English letters as the sign outside. He looked around and hesitated to ring the bell. Am I being rude? I'll just wait a second and see if someone comes out, he thought. He held his hand over the brass bell and looked around the opulent lobby. There was a door behind the desk about 10 feet away, which was obviously a manager's office, or the place where an employee would hide out of sight if they weren't busy. Where is everyone? David whispered to himself. Here goes nothing. He gently tapped the pin on the bell, and simultaneously a tall, slender man walked out of the door behind the desk as the bing faded. The man had a strong complexion, long, gangly appendages, and a clean, smooth face that was likable at first glance. Welcome to Meri Hotel. How can I help you today? He asked with a grin. Sorry about the bell, David said apologetically. Don't worry about it, the man behind the desk interrupted. The card says for assistance, and that's for a reason. The man pointed to his name tag. My name is Ralston. You can call me Raleigh if you'd like. And again, welcome to the Meri. This place is beautiful. I was actually pretty worried about the fog driving in, but it cleared up fast. That marine layer sometimes lingers a little longer than we'd like, but I like to think that the misty fog makes us appreciate the clear sunny days a whole lot more, don't ya think? You know what? You are so right about that, David said with a pleasant, hopeful smile. Do you have a reservation, or are you here to enjoy our decadent lobby and happy hour? Ralston pulled the sleeve back on his dress shirt and tapped the face of his watch, which will be happening soon. Oh yeah, I set up a reservation online a few weeks ago. Here's my confirmation number. David slid his smartphone out of his back pocket and showed a screen with his reservation booking number. Oh yes, Mr. Rapt. David Rapt. Let me see here. Ralston pulled out a black leather-bound reservation book and eloquently sat it down on the lobby desk. He pulled out a pen that was wedged in the spine of the book and started scanning up and down, looking for the reservation number page by page. No computer, huh? David asked, seeking a quick smile or chuckle from Ralston. Oh yes, we have a computer, but when a reservation is complete, it gets written in this book. Can you even imagine what a computer would look like in a sanctified place like this? It would throw off the purpose of Meri, don't ya think? David looked around the lobby and saw a beautiful dark-haired woman sitting on a chair, drinking from a fluted glass. She had a dress on with a nice pair of heels, which was unusual in the days of stretchy pants and flip-flops. Her attention was given to a large window view of the ocean, and she looked to be preoccupied with her thoughts. I see there is another guest here, David said. Ralston looked up and gave the guest a glance. Oh yes, we have a lot of guests. That woman over there is Miss Cull. She's actually been here for quite a while now. She's waiting for something, or someone specific, and that, sir, she keeps as a secret to herself. Oh, here we go. David Rapt, you're in room number 5, 3rd floor. David turned his attention from Miss Cull and looked back at Ralston, who was holding a key out for David. Wow, I didn't realize you grabbed a key. Thank you. It's no problem, sir. Now, if there is anything you need, don't hesitate to press the button in your room. It's by the door when you first walk in. Okay, thanks. I'll grab my bag and head to my room. Room 5, 3rd floor? That's correct, Mr. Rapt. David turned around and headed to the front door. He hesitated and turned back around to ask Ralston a question. Yes? Ralston asked as he stood behind the lobby desk from what seemed like an immovable position. Which staircase? Now that is a great question, Mr. Rapt. Which staircase? Look at it like this. If there was a fork in the road, which road do you choose? One will take you this way, and the other will take you that way. I like to think that both roads lead to the same place. The only difference is the journey of how you get to your destination. That is what truly matters. The fork in the road. Ralston pinched the bottom of his chin with curiosity on his mind. You've got a choice, 2 staircases. You decide the journey. David looked towards the entrance and then looked back at Ralston, but Ralston was gone, just like that, without a sound, like a shadowy silhouette on a wall in a dark room. If you have to ask yourself, am I imagining things? The chance is more likely that you are. There went Raleigh, David said under his breath. He took a glance at Miss Cull, who was still holding her glass and looking out of the window, except now she acquired a bounce of her leg. David partook in the shaking of the leg as well. It was a ritual he often performed when the slight feeling of anxiety began to creep in, or an anticipation of something or someone. So he immediately identified with Miss Cull and felt a slight kinship to her psyche. David was back in the lobby in minutes after grabbing his suitcase from his car. He stood in reverence to the magnificent staircases that spiraled up to the 3 available floors and contemplated his simple decision of which one to ascend. He lamented about his past as images of memories flickered across his mindscape. The neglect he felt from his parents as a child, his failures in business, and the wasted years with his fiancée. The good years wasted, he whispered, shaking his head. David meandered to the staircase, holding onto his suitcase. He analyzed the perfect curve of the dark wooded banister and the meticulous slats of wood and iron that followed underneath. He felt drawn to the right staircase and stopped just before the first step. He looked back, and Miss Cull turned to face David with piercing eyes. She lifted her flute glass to her painted lips and elegantly allowed a pinch of liquid into her throat. She showed her glass to David as if she was toasting him on the wedding day that never happened. She sat back down and once again casted her gaze to the ocean view. David smiled and began walking up. Somehow, in a strange way, he felt that metaphorically, he was rising out of the quagmire of his life and into new beginnings. He walked past the first and second floor landings, which, by quick glance, were short hallways with doors that led to the other suites. Small lamps were mounted high next to each door and softly lit the corridors, revealing the ornate decor. He stepped onto the third floor, landing, and looked down towards the lobby, satisfied at his small trek of steps. "Room 5, let's see here." He walked to the first door, which had a brass placard where a number 1 was etched into it. Then he came to door 3, and finally door number 5. He held out the key and slid it into the lock tumbler, and the pins in the lock accepted it perfectly without resistance. He opened the door and walked in, closing the door behind himself. There was a small lamp on a table at the far end of the room, and it showed the basic size of the suite, which was decent. The bathroom was directly to right of the door, and he reached in and flipped on the light switch. Small, glossy white tile from floor to wall. Small, freestanding porcelain sink and tub, all classic in design. Nice. His exploration proceeded further into the suite and brought him to a fairly large room with a king-size bed, a flat-screen TV, and the small table. He sat his suitcase down on a lounge chair that was nestled in the corner between the bed and a sliding glass door. He stretched his arms up into the air and felt the muscles in his back flex, and with the help of gravity, he dropped his body to the mattress and sunk into the soft bedding. His eyes felt tired, and they burned when he closed them. His mind felt peace, and just as he could have fallen asleep, he opened them and stared at an unfamiliar ceiling. I never thought I would have ended up like this. A shitty job and a failed, long-term relationship. I can't stand my family. What did I do wrong? It's like I've been cursed. He pinched the inside corners of his eyes, and it felt sorrowfully good. A roaring clamor from outside became clear and sounded off in timed intervals. He walked to the sliding glass door and slid it open. The ocean waves were crashing against the shoreline rocks, as if the water was made of iron that chipped away at the porous gray rock with each crushing blow. He watched for a moment, as a spectator of God's creation, as the white, foamy water flew into the air violently. The room was deafening and silent after he slid the door closed. Just a muffled copy of the in-stereo version of the waves that were just outside the door. He grabbed his suitcase and sat it on the bed and pressed the lock buttons on the front, and they snapped open like little switchblades. He opened the case and admired the .38 revolver that sat on top of his clothes, and he grabbed it with a sense of contemplation. He reached into his pocket and pulled out one singular .38 round and slid it into the empty cylinder of the gun. He spun the cylinder to mix up the location of the bullet, and he sat down on the edge of the bed. He slowly pulled the gun up and placed the cold, black steel barrel to his temple. He moved his finger onto the trigger and pulled it just enough to move the hammer. He paused for a moment, just before squeezing the trigger all the way, and saw the service button on the wall by the door. He pulled the gun away and walked over to the button and pressed it. "Yes?" the voice on the other side asked. David recognized the voice to be Ralston. "Is this Ralston, yes? How can I help you, Mr. Rapt?" When is happy hour? David asked. Well, it just started, Ralston replied. Okay, thanks. David remained quiet in deep thought. Is that all? Mr. Rapt? Yes, thank you. He sat back down on the bed and placed the gun to his temple once more. He couldn't help to think of his past failures, from the minuscule to the overbearing. After all, his fiancée constantly threw them in his face at every chance, and his family was just as flippant and thoughtless when it came to his opinion regarding just about everything. A stream of conversation rambled through his brain. Is there anything I can be proud of in my life? An accomplishment? Anything that has been worthwhile? Something that would cause anyone around me to care that I exist? The answer is no, nothing. Everything is futile and meaningless. I'm sure there was a time when I mattered, he thought. David knew he should have acted more like a man and stopped crying about the past and dwelling on it. He also knew without a doubt it was a surefire way to make himself repeat it. But it was the feeling of absolute loneliness and failure that brought him to this suite at the Meri Hotel. Nobody cares. Nobody really cares if I'm alive. He toyed with the trigger of the .38, and the hammer again began to pull back slow and steady. He closed his eyes tightly with anticipation, and the hammer fell. Click. The absence of the powder blast of the bullet sobered David instantly. What the hell am I doing? He spoke out as clarity took the forefront of his mind. He dropped the gun back in his suitcase. He rushed to the bathroom and flipped on the light, revealing the pristine, stark white motif of the tiles and porcelain. The freestanding sink was straight ahead, and the water was cool and soothing when he splashed it on his face. He dried off his cheeks and forehead and took a long look into his mirrored eyes, and the corneas were fully dilated. It's time for a change. What are you thinking, David? He said to himself sternly. He stood up straight and examined his exterior and felt a sudden sense of hope fill his soul. The fact that I was willing to pull the trigger has to mean something. That means I have the guts to live on my terms, change, and be a man. That is the meaning I've been looking for. He left his suite immediately from the bathroom. He was light on his feet. His shoulders felt tall and confident as he descending down the stairs. Miss Call was still in her chair when David reached the bottom of the staircase. She turned around and stood up. Hello, Mr. Rapt. We haven't officially met. My name Colonial. She held her hand out. Ms. Colonial Call. It's a strange name, I know, but what's a girl to do about the name her crazy parents gave her? She smiled beautifully. Nice to meet you, David said as he gripped her smooth, soft hand. She had elegant blush pink fingernails, and that was something David loved on a woman. Manicured nails. I can truly say that I've never met anyone with the name Colonial. It's really beautiful. Well, thank you, Miss Call replied. You know, happy hour has just started. How about a drink? I'd love that, David said. Come on, the bar is this way. The bar was down a small hallway to the left of the staircases, and upon entering, it was obviously decorated in a 1940s retro style. This place is amazing, David said as he quickly soaked in the low lighting and pale pastel colors. I love it here. This is my favorite table, Colonial said. They sat down at a two-person table below opulent square glassed chandeliers. A crystalline votive with a single flame lit up their faces as they rested their arms on a white starched tablecloth. Ralston walked up from somewhere unseen with a bottle of champagne and 3 fluted glasses. Champagne? He asked smoothly. Ralston poured the dry bubbly into the glasses, and it fizzed to brimful. Ralston lifted his glass for a toast. I would like to propose a toast to our new guest, Mr. David Rapt. Everyone clinked their glasses together and sipped their refreshments. "Did you find what you were looking for, Mr. Rapt?" Ralston asked. David took another sip. "Actually, I did. I feel great, like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. Well, the Meri can have a lasting effect on people. I'm going to be honest with you guys here, and maybe it's the champagne or the sense of freedom that I'm experiencing. I was going to shoot myself today, in the head. Boom." David motioned with his hand to his head, make a gesture of a gun. "I was going to play Russian roulette and follow through with it. But I think deep down inside, I thought I would never pull the trigger, and guess what? I did. I pulled the trigger." David smiled and took another swig of the champagne that emptied his glass. Ralston slowly poured another refill, and it bubbled up. David quickly brought it to his lips, and he felt the bubbles pop into his face like little fleeting comets. Ralston made a peculiar face to Ms. Cull, and she met his look with equaled eyes of peculiarity. "He doesn't know, Raleigh," Miss Cull whispered subtly. "It seems that he does not," Charles said. "You are a real sad case, Mr. Rapt, and I'm happy that you came to Meri." "What do you mean I'm a sad case?" David asked. "It happens that in a rare occasion, the hotel will pick its own guest. Someone who really has lost their will to live. Someone who possesses such an unadulterated sense of unworthiness of life that the universe has to step in and help put them out of their misery. Someone like you." "What do you mean? I feel great." "We heard it, Mr. Rapt." "You heard what?" David asked. The bullet went off and we heard it." "That can't be. I'm perfectly fine," David said while he felt around his head. "You feel fine because you did it. You pulled the trigger. You had the will to pull the trigger. Bravo, Mr. Rapt." Miss Cull raised her glass with a smile. "No, that can't be. I'm fixed. I'm ready to take on the rest of my life. I'm finally in control of my own life." David stood up and hit the table with his legs as began to panic out of control. The brief time in his hotel room bolstered around in his memory, and he could possibly remember a microsecond of a gun blast. "David, it's okay you're here with us now," Ralston calmly said as he touched David's shoulder. David looked up, and the bar was filled with patrons of all races and creeds. They all held their glasses up to David and gave him a welcoming toast. "Welcome, David. Welcome to the Meri Hotel." "I didn't know it at first, but you're the one I've been waiting for," Miss Cull added as she took hold of David's hand tenderly. "Sit, David, sit. Tonight, we honor you as a man of courage, a man who has followed through with something he set out to do, and from here to eternity, we shall look upon you as a man of success. Welcome." Ralston held up his glass, and the room cheered jovially to the presence of their new honoree. David calmed and sat down. He quickly forgot about his past and his future, and relished in his eternal now, and took another sip of his victory champagne. "I did it," he whispered with a smile. A young woman trounced into the hotel with one suitcase in each hand. She was sopping wet from the rainstorm that she endeavored on her way to Meri. The piano played softly in the air, and the eloquence of the lobby was striking to her eyes. She walked up to the lobby desk and quickly rang the bell at the absence of a concierge. The two staircases were illuminated by soft light and were immaculate. "Good afternoon. Welcome to the Meri Hotel. My name is Charles Ralston. You can call me Raleigh if you'd like. How can I help you?" "Yes, Raleigh, I have a reservation. My name, Jenny Spoilsport." Ralston pulled out his reservation book and scanned through his reservation names. "Can we hurry it up? I am freezing and wet." Ralston looked up from his book and then looked back down to the pages. Here we go. Spoilsport. Mrs. Jenny Spoilsport. You're in room 6, second floor. Great. Key if you don't mind. Mrs. Spoilsport held out her hand. It's already in your hand, Mrs. Spoilsport, Ralston declared. Jenny looked down at her hand, and a key with the number 6 was hooked around her finger. How did you do that? Jenny asked. A little sleight of hand, Ralston said, smiling. Enjoy your stay. There's a button by the door inside your suite. If you need help, just press it, and we'll take care of anything you need. Mrs. Spoilsport walked up to the staircases and stopped. Hey, Raleigh, which one? She yelled out. You choose Mrs. Spoilsport, you see. It's like a fork in the road. You choose your path. I will tell you this. What you take up those stairs with you will determine how your stay will be. At the Meri. Mrs. Spoilsport looked up at the staircases and smiled. The Inheritance.